There was a small village surrounded by green hills and farms. Princess Adanne lived in this little village, and her father was King Chuck Mecca, who ruled over the village. Adanne was the king's oldest daughter, and she was known for being kind and gentle princess who treated the villagers well. But Princess Adanne had a difficult issue that she struggled with her whole life. She had a strong body odor that smelled quite bad. Even as a young girl, her smell was noticeably worse than the other children's. As Adanne grew older, her odor worsened, becoming a pungent and unpleasant smell that trailed behind her wherever she went. As she grew into a young woman, the people in the village began treating her differently. They tried to stay away from her because of her smell. Behind her back, some villagers made unkind jokes and whispered about how stinky the princess was. Mothers would pull their children inside their homes when they saw Adanne walking down the dusty village road. Even the young girls, who were once her friends, would turn and go in the opposite direction to avoid talking to her. This left Adanne feeling heartbroken. There were many young men in the village and neighboring kingdoms who initially wanted to court Adanne because of her beauty and her royal status. But as soon as they came close enough to smell her, they were driven away. Despite her beauty and status, no man wanted to pursue her, which made Adanne feel increasingly lonely. She leaving the palace most days and would sit in her bedroom, gazing out the window. She dreamed of true love, hoping for a man who could accept her as she was. She imagined a husband who wouldn't care about her odor and would love her for her kind heart. But as time passed, this dream seemed more and more impossible, and Adanne often cried from loneliness. One hot and vibrant summer day, Adanne was fanning herself in her castle bedroom. She left her shutters open, hoping to catch a breeze. Suddenly, she heard lively sounds coming from the village square, the joyous beats of drums and the laughter of people. She leaned out her window and saw a crowd dancing around a bonfire, celebrating the summer feast day. For the first time in a while, Adanne felt a stir of excitement. Maybe, she thought, she could sneak out and observe the festivities without being noticed. The villagers seemed so happy and distracted. Quietly, Princess Adanne left the palace and tiptoed to the edge of the village square. At first, no one noticed her as she stood in the shadows, watching wistfully as the girls her age spun in colorful skirts. But then, a breeze picked up and carried Adanne's unfortunate scent through the crowd. People began to wrinkle their noses and glance around, trying to find the source of the stench. Soon, the drumming stopped, and all eyes turned toward the lonely princess. Gasps of shock filled the air as people pointed and whispered. The joy and merriment vanished. Adanne's eyes filled with tears as she was humiliated by their ridicule. Overcome with shame, she ran from the crowd and hid behind some bushes, trembling. She crouched behind a tree, hoping no one would find her. Then, through her tears, she heard the steady beat of a drum approaching. Fearfully, she peered through the leaves and saw a smiling young man from a neighboring village walking toward her, playing a hand drum. When he reached her, he stopped playing and asked kindly, "Why did you stop dancing? You looked so joyful and free back there." Adanne was stunned. This stranger had followed her even though he could clearly detect her scent. "You can smell me," she said incredulously, "and yet you still came looking for me? Everyone in my village teases me and laughs at me." The young man smiled gently. "Don't worry about them. I think you're a wonderful dancer. Please ignore their unkind words. Dance with happiness and freedom." Adanne was surprised by the young man's kind words. She realized that he truly didn't care about her odor, and for the first time in a long while, she felt comforted. She decided she would ignore the cruel taunts of her neighbors and dance freely, just as she wished. The young man began playing a cheerful, upbeat rhythm on his hand drum. Adanne was unsure at first, but after a moment, she started swaying lightly to the music. The stranger's smile grew even wider as he watched her begin to move. He picked up the pace of his drumming, playing faster while keeping his eyes warmly fixed on hers. Adanne could feel that he was truly seeing her, not just her outward appearance, but her heart and soul. For the first time in her life, she felt completely accepted, just as she was. This realization freed her spirit. She let go of her self-consciousness and began dancing fluidly, her body moving in graceful motions that left her feeling breathless and elated. As the drumming accelerated, Adanne's feet moved faster. She leapt and spun with ease, weaving swift, elaborate steps that came to her instinctively. The rhythm seemed to flow through her, filling her with joy and vitality. With the stranger's admiring gaze holding hers, she felt liberated to fully express her love of dance. When Princess Adanne finally stopped, she and the smiling stranger held each other's gaze for a moment. She felt exhilarated from the joyful dancing and uplifted by the fact that, for the first time, she had felt truly seen and accepted by someone. Then suddenly, they both burst into laughter, connecting in their shared happiness. After they caught their breath, the young man introduced himself as Aaron. He lived in a nearby village and played drums at local events and celebrations. Aaron asked Princess Adanne if she would meet him in this same spot behind the bushes again tomorrow. He wanted to talk more and maybe play his drums for her to dance again. His warm smile and enthusiasm made it clear that he had greatly enjoyed their time together. Princess Adanne eagerly said yes. She would definitely meet Aaron again the next day. Her heart felt fuller and lighter than it had in years. All her life, she had been shunned and lonely due to her odor, but this stranger had accepted her and delighted in her dancing. Adanne hurried home, her head spinning, still giddy from the exhilaration of truly being seen. She was overjoyed at having met someone who wanted to meet her again. For the first time in her life, she had made a real friend, and her heart swelled with optimism and excitement about their next meeting behind the bushes. In the coming weeks, Princess Adanne's meetings with Aaron became the highlight of her days. Each afternoon, she would eagerly sneak away to their secret spot, where Aaron would be waiting with his drums. The two new friends shared long, lively conversations, telling stories and jokes that had them laughing for hours. While they talked, Aaron often picked up his drumsticks and played energetic rhythms, which delighted Princess Adanne and inspired her to dance with a freedom and joy she had never known. Around Aaron, Adanne let go of all her self-consciousness about her lingering odor. He made her feel so accepted that she could lose herself in the music. Her wild, uninhibited dancing only deepened their connection. As she twirled past him, Aaron would look at her with admiration for her spirit, her beauty, and her essence. Over the course of several weeks, their initial bond grew into a deep friendship, which soon blossomed into warm affection. Princess Adanne fell in love with Aaron, and she could feel his equal care and affection for her. Yet, a part of her ached secretly because of their differing stations in life. He, a commoner and struggling musician, and she, a sheltered royal with obligations to marry for political ties. Adanne assumed a future together was impossible, though in her most private dreams, she wished desperately that social status wouldn't interfere. She longed for the possibility that they could be united in marriage, for she had never felt as happy or accepted as she did with Aaron. One afternoon, as Princess Adanne and Aaron sat closely, talking and laughing as usual, Aaron gently took both of her hands in his. His expression shifted, becoming serious and full of emotion. Aaron told Adanne that he cared for her deeply and wanted them to be together forever. He asked her to marry him, expressing his wish that their two villages could be united through their union. Aaron said he didn't care about royal customs or needing permission. All he knew was that being with Adanne made him truly happy, and he wanted to build a life together, bonded in love. Princess Adanne was overwhelmed with surprise and joy at his heartfelt proposal. She cried tears of happiness, having longed to be Aaron's wife but believing it was impossible. She felt she didn't deserve such a wonderful man, one willing to defy social barriers to declare his unconditional love for her. In her excitement, Adanne threw her arms around Aaron, whispering yes against his smiling lips as they shared a long, tender kiss. She had never imagined that a love so freeing could be hers. When they finally pulled back, faces flushed and beaming with giddy smiles, the lovers excitedly made plans, still high on the possibilities of their future. They agreed to share the wonderful news with both of their families right away. First, they would ask Adanne's parents, the king and queen, for permission to marry, and then travel to Aaron's village to gain his family's approval and blessing as well. The ecstatic pair clasped hands tightly and set off on their new journey together toward a future as husband and wife. However, soon after their engagement, immense tragedy struck the villages, and Princess Adanne's joyful new world came crashing down. A deadly, fast-spreading plague swept through the countryside. Early symptoms included a raging fever and large, boil-like blisters on the skin. Within days, the infected would go into violent fits of madness and then fall deathly still. It was a horrific and painful way to die. In desperate efforts to contain the terrifying outbreak, the leaders of the 4 neighboring villages decided to completely seal off their borders. No one was allowed to travel between towns for any reason. If villagers attempted to flee, they were captured and quarantined, or even killed on sight by fearful guards. As the plague raged on week after week, residents hid in their homes, terrified to interact with anyone who might be infected. Friends and neighbors boarded up their doors and windows, only emerging briefly for provisions before scurrying back into self-imposed isolation. For Princess Adanne, weeks turned into months of being cut off from her beloved Aaron. She was trapped within the palace as the plague spread mercilessly. Her hope and joy for the future with Aaron faded into a daily fear for his safety. With no way to reach him, she could only pray he was still alive. The villages remained frozen in quarantine for endless months as the plague ran its course. Both Adanne and Aaron could only hope and pray the other was safe. Despite isolating herself in the palace, one morning, Princess Adanne awoke feverish, with terrifying red boils beginning to spread across her arms. The plague had reached her. Over the following days, she grew gravely ill. Her body burned with fevers so severe that her dressing gown and bedsheets were constantly soaked in sweat. She was left so weak that she couldn't even lift her head for sips of water. Watching their eldest daughter suffer was agonizing for the king and queen. Desperately, they tried every traditional remedy and modern medicine the royal doctor suggested, from herbal baths to maggot poultices meant to draw out the disease, but nothing eased Adanne's worsening condition. The situation became dire as the ghostly, pale, motionless princess seemed to slip away before their eyes. Finally, in despair, the queen recalled an obscure tonic that an old village woman had once brewed when Adanne was little. Although repulsed by the memory of the potion, she knew it might be their last hope. Queen had the old village woman prepare the potion, made from bitter roots and weeks-old animal blood. Gently, they spooned the revolting concoction into Adanne's mouth. Miraculously, just a day later, the princess finally stirred. Over the next week, under round-the-clock care, the strange medicine, along with the queen's loving touch, slowly brought Adanne back from the brink. Though still very frail, Princess Adanne had survived the illness that had claimed so many others. Overjoyed, her parents wept tears of gratitude as their daughter's fever fully broke, and she managed her first weak but beautiful smile. After several more days of rest and recovery, Princess Adanne finally felt strong enough to carefully stand up from her sickbed. Still unsteady on her feet after so long spent lying down and weakened by fever, she shuffled slowly across the room, one hand trailing along the wall for balance. Adanne made her way to the full-length mirror standing in the corner. Anxiously, she peered at her reflection and gasped aloud in shock. She barely recognized herself. The plague's vicious fever had tormented her body for so many days that her skin now looked fresher and more supple than Adanne could ever remember. Turning to look at her profile, she was overjoyed to find that she appeared healthier than she ever had. But most incredibly, as Adanne hesitantly lifted her arm to her nose for a sniff, she discovered that not a hint of her lifelong body odor remained. The prolonged feverish sweating must have purged the smell from her pores entirely. Princess Adanne let out an ecstatic laugh and twirled in disbelief, inhaling her now sweet-scented skin with joy. This miraculous change was beyond words. Finally, she was free of the odor that had plagued and isolated her since childhood. Nearly weeping in happiness, Adanne rushed to share the glorious news with her parents, the king and queen. She wanted everyone to know that the infection, which had nearly killed her, had also brought her an astonishing new sense of confidence and joy. After many more months, the rampant plague finally began to subside, and the strict quarantines on the villages were lifted at last. As Princess Adanne walked through the main gates of the castle for the first time in over a year, she held her breath nervously. She still vividly remembered the last time she had tried to join festivities in town, only to be met with cruel recoils, whispered insults, and people pulling their children away to avoid her stench. But today, everything was different. Amazingly, no one shied away from Adanne's approach. Villagers paused their revived marketplace, bartering to gaze in admiration as the princess floated by. Adanne was startled to hear praises called out for her graceful bearing and glowing health. Some villagers even cautiously stepped closer, wide-eyed, drinking in her beauty, entranced by her presence. The local young men, in particular, couldn't seem to stop watching her every move, their mouths half open in awe. For the first time that she could recall, Adanne moved through her kingdom feeling strong, confident, and truly accepted. Over the course of the plague's horrors, her cured odor and newfound confidence had transformed her into the village belle, someone no one could ignore. Princess Adanne felt dizzy with the thrill of acceptance and admiration from the villagers. She used to hide from the world before, but now, caught up in self-pride over her cured odor and newfound beauty, Princess Adanne had nearly forgotten her loyal love, Aaron. As she walked through town, admiring the attention she received, she suddenly spotted a familiar figure bounding eagerly down the road toward her. He was Aaron, her dear friend, companion, and bridegroom-to-be, whom she hadn't seen in over a year since the plague struck. Adanne's first eager impulse was to run straight into his arms, overwhelmed with teary relief that he was safe. But she caught herself, doubts surfacing. Surely, now, she was too far above someone of common status like Aaron. She was a pampered royal, and he, a mere drummer boy without notable wealth or a family name to elevate him. Thoughts of insecurity and pride swirled in her mind. The princess quickly composed her face into a formal, distant mask before Aaron could reach her. When he did, the drummer boy was grinning from ear to ear, his joy palpable. "My princess, how I have missed basking in your beauty and radiance," he cried out, moving toward her as if expecting a warm embrace. But Adanne stood reserved and still, making no move to welcome him after their long separation. Aaron, full of joy, stepped forward to hug Princess Adanne, so thankful to see his beloved after agonizing months apart. But to his shock, the princess recoiled sharply, stepping away from him. A look of deep surprise and hurt flashed across Aaron's face at her rejection. Confused, he searched her now cold eyes for an explanation. In sharp, cutting tones, nothing like her once warm voice, Adanne stated that she no longer wished to continue their relationship. She coldly told him that after enduring the plague's terrors and emerging more beautiful than ever, she now moved in higher social circles, ones that a common boy like Aaron could never be a part of. Aaron, deeply hurt by Adanne's harsh words, looked devastated. "But Adanne, I love you," he protested passionately. "These months of silence only made me love you more. I'd do anything to make you my wife." Princess Adanne met his gaze with a fiery glare. "You will address me as Princess Adanne," she commanded coldly. "This conversation is over. I deserve someone better than you." She spat out the words, feeling a cruel satisfaction in them. Without a backward glance or a moment to listen to his heartbroken cries, she turned away, marching off with determination. Her head held high, her fancy clothes and regal demeanor hid the deep pain she felt inside. In Adanne's mind, cutting off their connection so abruptly closed that chapter of her life for good. Now she had plenty of noble suitors vying for her attention. In the following months, the increasingly vain princess continued with court life, acting as though the humble drummer boy, Aaron, had never touched her heart. She entertained extravagant marriage proposals from respected lords and princes, one after another. These influential men had once turned away from Adanne in disgust, but now they shamelessly showered her with flattery, eager for the attention of the newly transformed princess. Adanne grinned, soaking up their compliments about her flawless skin, graceful movements, and regal bearing, praises she could never have imagined receiving before. Yet, despite the adoration, She couldn't shake the regret gnawing at her heart for pushing Aaron away so harshly. As the weeks passed, King Chuckmecca urged Princess Anne to quickly choose a husband from the numerous suitors vying for her hand, warning her that rumors about her prolonged singlehood could damage her marriage prospects. Wanting to keep all eyes on her, Adanne declared that she would host a wrestling tournament where the kingdom's strongest men would compete for the chance to marry her. Upon hearing this, men of great strength traveled from far and wide, eager for the opportunity to win the hand of the renowned beauty. In the days leading up to the tournament, Adanne became obsessed with enhancing her appearance, determined to outshine everyone. Her maids tirelessly groomed her, but in her pursuit of outer perfection, Adanne neglected basic cleanliness, even forgoing regular baths. Slowly but surely, her old body odor returned. On the morning of the wrestling tournament, the weather was perfect, providing an ideal backdrop to showcase Princess Adanne's beauty. She entered the bustling arena, confident that all eyes would be on her. The arena was adorned with shimmering silks, and Princess Adanne, draped in jewels, aimed to dazzle the crowd. As she lifted her delicate hand to wave at the cheering spectators, their excitement suddenly shifted. A surprised whisper spread quickly among the people. One by one, they moved away, wrinkling their noses at the strong smell coming from the princess. Embarrassed, men hid their faces, avoiding eye contact. Princess Adanne felt a deep pang of humiliation as the tournament participants shook their heads and left, unwilling to stay. The villagers watching from the stands also followed suit, talking quietly about her body odor while holding their noses in disgust. Adanne was utterly crushed. She felt the weight of shame pressing down on her. Tears welled in her eyes as she quickly removed her fancy royal clothes and jewelry, dropping them into the dirt. Overcome with emotion, she turned and ran as fast as she could, desperate to escape the judgment of those around her. As Adanne fled, her eyes landed on one figure standing alone across the tournament grounds. Aaron. He stood tall, his expression gentle and kind as he watched her hurried retreat. After a moment, Aaron began walking purposefully toward her, his face showing both concern and sadness for her distress. When Aaron reached Adanne, he spoke softly. "My dear, precious one, how could you think so little of our love and what we meant to each other? Why would you give up our bond for the fleeting attention of others?" Tears streamed down Adanne's cheeks as she shook her head in regret. "Please forgive me, Aaron," she whispered. "I made a terrible mistake, thinking that outward beauty was more important than the love we shared. I was vain and careless, and now I've lost the most important thing in my life, your love and care." Will these two become one again as before? The answer is coming in part 2. Stay tuned.